Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mrs. Kalsi. Thanks for that very kind introduction to me and about my work here at IIT Bombay. Um, so, you and all your colleagues at Vidya, I understand, are doing a great work because Mrs. Mishra was sort of here with Professor Ashok Mishra when he was the director at IIT Bombay, and I know both of them very closely. And it is privileged to talk to the young children. I always sort of as a part of our work of the am I audible actually, ma'am? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Right. So, as a part of the work of Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas at IIT Bombay, we often travel to the Mofussil towns and the villages, and not only in Maharashtra where IIT Bombay is located, but in other states as well. We travel and we often take a time. One of the unique feature of our program here at IIT Bombay in Technology and Development, leading to masters and PhD, is we ask the students to stay for 9 weeks in rural areas and stay, and like what our MKG, to our younger friends, MKG is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He said that you have to live with villages to see their pain points and sort of, then have the technology as whatever propositions and solutions. So I often take out a time to go to a village school and talk to the students, and often at times I find last almost 15 years or 1.5 decade, I find that whenever I ask this question in a class to the students in rural villages, that 95% or over of their parents would be engaged in domain of agriculture, and I ask this question: how many of you would like to sort of continue or inherit your parents occupation? And you find hardly 10%, 5% or something like that hands get raised. So we can understand the misery and drudgery that our friends in rural areas are facing. And another sort of a thing that has come across, and that's the theme of the talk today, is, and let me share my screen now. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So is the screen visible? Is the screen visible? Hello? Can you see my screen? Hello? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, we are able to see your screen, sir.
Right. So the topic today given to me by the organizers is malnutrition, or rather nutrition, and how can we handle, how can we improve on our nutrition so that we would have lesser and lesser of this malnutrition. Because I sort of undertook that this as a topic for my one of the topics for my research is only in around 2010, and it was one of our alumnus of IIT Bombay, in fact, who is settled in United States and working there for last 30-35 years. He came to IIT after some 30 years and sort of said that you are a food processing engineer, why don't you work on malnutrition? He said, then I told him, what malnutrition? We are a country which is arrived. We don't have this kind of a problem. Then he opened my eyes and showed it to me, the data from the NFHS, which is National Health and Family Surveys, and you will see, for example, some of these sort of from the data, because these days sort of we say that any policy has to be, or any advocacy has to be data driven, or any statement that you make has to have a data. So you will see some of these data here. And like for my young friends here, like how do we define malnutrition? So in a very, very small sort of definition of malnutrition that I have put down here is like, it is the deficiency or even excess or imbalance in a person's intake of energy or nutrients. So all of you know that I remember my school teacher used to ask me a question, why do we eat food? And that time our answer was because we want calories. And the same question we ask at the PhD level here to the students: why do we eat food, and what kind of food it should be, so that you get a balanced food, not only for calories but also for nutrients, and we will see what that means. um, so for example, the malnutrition, you have what the sort of, in the domain of or the science of malnutrition, the people who are engaged is our friends from medical fraternity, pediatricians, like if it is child malnutrition, and nutritionists and dietitians. They say that, you have three types of malnutrition, and which is based on some measurements. We call it anthropometry, some and for which we need just a balance and a sort of, a height measuring device. So if you know your height and age, as well as your weight, there is a thing called BMI, body mass index. But for children which are below 6 years, we have an institution which is called ICDS. Some of your teachers definitely would know. ICDS stands for Integrated Child Development Scheme, because as I mentioned, when I told my alumnus friend of IIT Bombay from US that we are an arrived country and we don't, and then therefore he showed me that all that statistics, and and with him, I started this work, and how to sort of make the formulations and sort of, try to bring out the children who are what you typically call as SAM and MAM. So what SAM means, severe acute malnutrition, and MAM means moderate acute malnutrition. So we have put a little mathematics into this, and I will not really get into that mathematics as to how do we define a moderately acute malnutrition using the science of statistics. We calculate some Z scores, but for this time, you just understand that you have three types of undernutrition. One is called wasting. We say a child below 6 years, in this Anganwadi is basically where they track their growth. We say that they are low weight for height. They take their heights and they take their weights, and then they say that the child is vested. For example, I just told you a score called Z score. If he is below sort of, -2 Z scores, or it's called standard deviation, the child is vested. So he's low weight for his height. The child is stunted if height is not adequate. Many a times, for example, of my sort of, generation, I would say those who are born, let's say between 1940s and 60s, we often at times had to resort to sort of, ration food, and many of us are stunted. So you will say, at least from my database, 7 out of 10 times you will see, that is 70%, 7 out of 10 times you see that the children are taller than the parents, which means even we had an opportunity to grow that much, but and our children have grown sort of are taller than us, and perhaps you would have a similar observation. So that's stunting. Stunting is low height for their age, and underweight is low weight for age. So say there is an organization called WHO. You would have heard of one of the UN organization is World Health Organization. In the World Health Organization has brought out with some charts, and fortunately now I happen to visit, because of this project, to number of Anganwadis in different states: Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, for example. I have visited the Anganwadis, and so those Anganwadi workers would have those colorful charts which give you, for example, those are called WHO growth charts, or even we say Indian growth chart. So you'll have a X and Y axis, and those are colored, and whatever is the green zone, for example, you will be shown that the child is growing normally. Okay, so this is one, like as I said, anthropometric measurements which tell us undernutrition. Then there is a micronutrient related malnutrition, which means what? See, your teachers would be telling you in the class, for example, class of science, that if you, in order to live healthy life, you must have a good immunity to certain diseases, right? They say that you eat, for example, carrots, which will give you a good vitamin A, and you will not have any eye problems. Not only carrot, but there are certain others. Then, for example, if you want your good bones and all that, you will see pictorially later on also. Say you have to drink some milk, which gives you a source of vitamin D, or you have to sort of, at least 15 to 20 minutes in a day, you have to expose 50 to 60% of your body parts to sunlight. So because what sunlight, I'm sorry, normally when I do it offline, the children are in front of me and I ask them questions, but now I can't ask them questions. So you all know, for example, that 50 to 60 percent of your body, if you 15 to 20 minutes in a day, you expose to sunlight. And just on a lighter side, for example, our orthopedic expert at IIT tells us that something like 70 to 80% of population, including me, I am in that 70 to 80%, are vitamin D deficient. So what they do, they give you 6 monthly dose. You have to take vitamin D through a dose. And the reason the orthopedic surgeon says that, your campus is too forested. I don't know, some of you might have visited IIT Bombay, and we have a very good forest. We in fact, one of our colleagues wrote a book like IIT Bombay of forestry and monastery and laboratory. So we have a very good forest here. And one of the sort of, side effects of that is we do not get a good exposure for 15 to 20 minutes to sunlight, which gives you that vitamin D, for example, to have your bone structure good. The other way, I think, as you saw in the definition in the last slide, excesses, for example. So it is actually called a double burden in malnutrition, that we have a population which is like children which are obese, for example, or overweight. And we call it as basically in urban India, for example, we see that it's a one child syndrome. And the child, for example, because if both the parents are working, because of the economic pressure, the child gets sort of spoiled, and we call it as a couch potato. What that means is the child keeps watching the television in the absence of parents and just keeps eating something which is lipid based and fat. So that causes some kind of obesity, and it's other side of malnutrition. So pictorially it is said here, who is underweight, normal, and then you have some kind of obesity that you have in our population. So that also is called as one kind of a malnutrition. So look at this data. I told you the importance of data. NFHS, for example, or Ministry of Family and Health, Ministry of Family and Health gives you this kind of a data that around 45% of the deaths among children less than 5 years of age are linked to undernutrition. So look at that importance of nutrition, look at the importance of that nutrition. You have some more global data, not only Indian data, but you have this kind of a data which says 47 million children under the age of 5 are wasted. And I just gave you a definition of wastage, wasting, which is like, you have a lower weight for your age. 14.3 million are severely wasted. Okay, where you say the Z score is less than -3, which means your standard deviations are sort of, -3, below -3. 144 million are stunted. They are not grown to their potential. And 38.3 million are overweight or obese. So that's what I called it as a double burden, that you have both undernourished as well as overweight children. And even overweight is not good for your subsequent life. So what we say that it's like a building. Okay, our friends in civil engineering, for example, build or recommend how to build a house. And when you have a house, you have to have a good foundation, so that your house lasts for 70, 80, 90 years. And the same for a human being. If we want a human being to live for 60, 70, 80 years in good health, you have to have good foundation. And in order to have that good foundation, nutrition is very, very, closely linked. What we call it as correlation coefficients. I will not get into that mathematics, R square values and all that, but it is very heavily correlated with what we eat. Or in fact, in your English language, you might have read this, that you are what you eat. You are what you eat. So you see, for example, this is in a cartoon format. It is shown that normal growth is like this. Vested is low weight for height. So this is something which is a normal height that we would expect. And you have, for example, stunted, so which is low height for age, and underweight, for example. So these are the classifications which people use in the domain of malnutrition, or in the science of malnutrition, as I said. So let us look at what are the causes of malnutrition. Okay, let us look. Definitely, it is not, I mean, it is something which all of us know by now, that if you don't use nutritious food, or if you don't feed not only calories but other micronutrients, you are likely to be. But what are the other? So like poverty, for example, which sort of um, 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 see that you see of late during the COVID times, and later we have such an inflation that even the middle class people find it difficult to buy the fruits and vegetables, the green vegetables and fruits. So poverty, or is a relative term, but that's one of the reason that we don't have enough nutrition, and results into malnutrition. Then you have those so poverty is here. Then you have unhygienic conditions, as mentioned, unhealthy environment, that we see. You visit any city, any official town, you see just at the outskirts, you will see these kinds of sites. We are unable to manage our own kachra, our own waste. We are not able to do that. So that's another unhealthy environment, is one of the reasons as to why, for example, a great number of our people, or a proportion of our population, is malnourished. Frequent infection, this is called morbidity in medical terms, that you have a frequent, the child remains cough and cold, bar bar aata hai, and then bar bar fever aata hai, it's a little sort of concentration of those vectors which cause you disease, gives you a sort of and that's why of late you would have seen during the COVID-19 also, though people believed, and people still continue to believe, that something gives you a good immunity, and people have gone back to our earlier kadas and all those kinds of things. So those who have a good immunity have a lesser chance to get to those affected and get into the disease condition. So then, how to overcome this undernutrition and become healthy? So that's the question. So you have both nutritious food, as you can see here. There are a number of, for example, websites, like one of the very popular website is My Plate. So if you see My Plate, then that give you an advisory. So we have a in Hyderabad, there is one CSIR institution which is called National Institute of Nutrition, NIN. So NIN is a part of ICMR, and they publish every 5 years what is called as RDA advisory. What RDA stands for is recommended dietary allowance. So depending on, like, what kind of age group you are, what kind of lifestyle you are doing, for example, for adults, like whether you have a sedentary lifestyle, or you are a labor, you do a lot of physical labor for your living, then what is the kind of a recommended diets per day. And recommended diet, not only, as I said, in calorie forms, but also in micronutrient form. How much iron you need, what is the quota of your iron, what is the quota of your calcium, and all that is given. So, and of course, the physical activity is something. So what you eat, plus how sort of well you burn your calories, is also something good. So in the course of my last, as I mentioned, some 3-4 years back, our team at IIT Bombay had created this film, which is for ICDS program. I just mentioned to you, it's one of the world's largest program, called Integrated Child Development Scheme. Some of you would have heard about what Anganwadi is, what are ASHA workers, and all that. And so for those, for that ICDS scheme, which has a sort of, these AWW workers, ASHA, the Anganwadi worker, and who have a supervisor, and how do you, so if I may just let me sort of see if I can get to that film. I will just show you that film, which will tell you how, for example, we went with this uh, one sec, let me see. One second, just give me 1 sec. I think this would be interesting for you to see how, for example, what was IIT's contribution in one of the contributions. I mean, we did formulate uh, uh, number of what you call number of food formulations, and also we had this as let me see how I go here. Or let me see if I can show you something based on our Dharavi work. You know, one of some of those who are from Mumbai would know what Dharavi is, and we had this sort of. Are you able to see this? Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can see it is very clear, sir.
Right. So we had formulated certain products, and we had partnered with one of the Mumbai's BMC hospital known as Sion Hospital. And all you see, this pink army, is all these Anganwadi workers working in Dharavi. I will share the other links. For example, if those schools who would want to see our nutrition ki cricket match, they can see it. So you see ICDS take-home ration, and these were the 6 formulations that we had. Okay, so let me see where I was. So those who want to see that ICDS film, so you can actually just YouTube, go to YouTube and Google for nutrition ki cricket match for improving ICDS performance, IIT Bombay. You will be able to see that video there. And I'll just take another 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, please. It's
Another
very
10
interesting.
minutes,
Yeah.
okay. And sort of tell our young friends that I mentioned to you that you are what you eat, and therefore so this is something which gives you cereals, which sort of gives you energy. If you want to be musculated like our Dhoni or our Kohli, for example, then you have to eat this non-vegetarian food. Then this fruits and vegetables actually gives you a good immunity. We said that it has the required micronutrients, which sort of builds your immunity, and these infections do not give you that morbidity. And this is of course a dairy product which gives you vitamin D, and your bone structure is good. Yeah. Okay, so what and how much? So that is another question. Often at times people go to dietitians because they want to know what and how much food should we eat to remain healthy. And um, so there is this kind of a pyramid. For example, even at our IIT guest house, the eating place, the canteen, they have marked this food pyramid, as it is called, that what you should eat minimum, and what you should eat moderate, and what you should eat in good quantum is given. Number of these I mentioned to you. The NIN handbooks tells you the recommendations in terms of based on your age and all that. So in cereals, for example, what the nutritionists say, that now we have unfortunately converged only on two cereals, rice and wheat. But there are what is called as millets, for example, and therefore the UN organization like FAO has declared last decade as the year of millet. So these are some forgotten cereals that we have in the millet forms. So you need to not only converge of only on these two cereals, but it would be good if we can sort of eat other cereals, neglected cereals or something like that. And pulses, of course, those who are a vegetarian population and want to have a good amount of proteins, then you need to consume on a regular basis these kinds of pulses that you have. And of course, the importance of fruits and vegetables, I told you, because they contain a lot of minerals, a lot of vitamins, as they're clubbed together as micronutrients. So you have macronutrients, which are calories, proteins, and fats. These are macronutrients, and micronutrients are your vitamins and your minerals. And they come from these you might have seen on the television or even on on the hoardings in cities that, I eat so much of iron for my breakfast. These are the advertisement they say. And that's why you have those cornflakes and things like that, which are fortified. So you would have seen in our video, those formulations are something which we eat on every day. You have a Junka premix, Upma premix, Payasam premix. The difference that we made here, and you saw most of the children were so thin looking. They were from this marginalized communities, or we had also done a project last 2 years, for example, in Mankur, which is known as a cheetah camp area, a Star English School and Trombay High School. So there, for example, we did some kind of a not only anthropometry, but we had done this blood analysis, or it's called blood pathology. And we found that the children were lacking in micronutrients. And so we had taken this soya milk, and then that soya milk was fortified. So there is this new concept called food to food fortification. So you saw in the video that we were giving these dabbas of 7-in-1 packet. We called it 7-in-1. Why? For example, you had this 60 grams of supplemental food, which gave you not only macronutrients, but also micronutrients. And what we sort of, as a research outcome, that we had taken something like 400 children which were in MAM category, moderately acute malnourished. We gave them these supplements which are fortified, and something like 40 to 50% of the children, we could bring them out of the MAM. We didn't get 100% success because, as you know, there are reasons for different reasons that we pointed for malnutrition, and one of them was hygiene and the living conditions. So what we concentrated or what we gave was only some kind of a food supplementation, but other factors also need to be looked into. All this information, for example, you can get it in Google these days, what you should not eat and what you should eat. What you should not eat, the advisory is normally finished foods like you have here, for example, these donuts and all these biscuits and breads and these carbonated drinks, because number of schools also, we know that IIT Bombay KV, for example, had stopped this machine that gives you these all kinds of carbonated drinks, for example. So these are called empty calories. So they do not have the required micronutrients. So we need to avoid. So therefore, we have put a little cross here. We have put a cross here. And then I mentioned to you about this My Plate. My Plate is something which gives you what should be the portion of food, for example, that you have. And on there are lots of websites which tell you. I mean, My Plate is, for example, is a Western country website, but you have so many websites, for example, which tell you what you should eat for breakfast, what you should eat for lunch. For example, some of you know, for example, that khichdi has been declared as one of our superfood. The Ministry of Food Processing has declared khichdi because it has got the cereal as well as pulses, and this is something traditional and and also in our classes I tell our students that when you look into the domain of nutrition, you cannot forget taste. See, because food is a delivery mechanism for these nutrients. Privileged school, I mean, the schools where underprivileged children are coming, that how can we sort of fortify? So we had something like 9 micronutrients which were added to the soya milk. And we sort of, our results, which just 2 months back, we have sent it for a publication, that we could sort of, make these children sort of, sufficient in terms of, if they consume some 2 portions of 200 ml each, of this fortified drink. Okay, so so physical activity is important. Let me come to this last slide here. Personal hygiene also is important, and I think I would stop here because it would be more interesting rather than me giving you these facts, these statistics, these methods and expected outcomes. I would like my younger friends to sort of pose any questions that they may have. Thank you. I hope I have not taken too much time.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really very enlightening. I would request our VIDYA School students now to ask questions that you formulated.
Shall I stop sharing? I'll stop share and then we will listen to the questions.
So, good evening to all and everyone present over here. So, on the behalf of VIDYA School, I would like to ask some questions from sir. So, sir, my first question is that has technology helped in detecting and solving malnutrition?
Okay. So, what is your name, beta? What is your name?
Sir, Aditi.
Yeah, Aditi. So you might recall in one of the slides I mentioned the measurement technique of anthropometry. Simply what that anthropometry is like, if you sort of, find out what a BMI is, body mass index. So you need to sort of measure the weights and heights. So you will say that what is the technology required in measuring heights? But imagine once a week, if somebody comes and sort of does, let's say in your school, there are 300, 400 kids, right? How many children are there in your school? How many children are there?
So we have 900 plus.
Hello?
Aditi, please answer.
How many children? Would there be 200, 300? or
So
150?
in our school, we have 900 plus students.
Yeah. So now imagine, Aditi, in one day, if when the campaign comes and these technicians have to measure your heights and weights, there will be so much of error. So what we did was we developed some kind of a IR based technique to measure your height correctly. So, and then what we did was your weight and height is not only measured but also saved on your laptop immediately. So when we did a project in a nearby district called, a tribal district called Palghar here, we had something like 450 children of whose height we had to measure, height and weight had to be measured in one day, because you have your other school activities and all that. So that's one way that we have used technology. And other, Aditi, I would say is like, when we sort of called about food to food fortification, then there are techniques based on science, which is called encapsulation, micro encapsulation, which we use in our drugs, for example, the pills that we take. So there are some bioactive components. So in the same way, if we want to sort of capture this vitamin D, iron, have you heard of this, Aditi, the fortified namak? Have you heard, Aditi, about the namak, which is sort of fortified with iodine and iron? Have you heard of this? No? There is a Tata namak. You have to unmute, Aditi. Yes. Right? So
Yes.
this was to address the goiter issues, goiter issues. So there was this company which sort of took the science of how do we sort of add this sort of, so it is delivered. So the delivery mechanism is food, whatever so salt is something you eat every day, right? So there was an area, for example, in Rajasthan, where there was a lot of patients with goiter. And there, for example, if we could give this fortified food. So this is the role that science and technology can play. Yeah. Next question, Aditi.
Thank you so much, sir. So I would like to ask one more question. That is it true that childhood malnutrition leaves its imprint on the mind of those children who suffer from it?
Do you mean to say that if you have seen the malnutrition in your early formative ages, does that leave some impressions on you lifelong? Your question, does it hint
Yes,
to
sir.
the individuals who were malnourished, or those who really saw the malnutrition and they have some impressions? I didn't really understand. Your question is about those who were themselves malnourished, or those who saw, for example, by visiting slums like Dharavi. I don't know in Delhi what kind of the names of suburbs you have, but these underserved communities, you have the malnutrition. So what exactly?
Those who suffered from malnutrition.
For those who suffered from malnutrition, yes, absolutely, Aditi, because we know that in the first 6 years of your life, all your faculties, your brains are formed. In that, 99% of your brains are, your faculties are formed. So it is so important that nutrition is given in early ages. And many a times, if the malnourished children may also remain, for example, with lacking faculty development in their this one. So yes, it leaves the marks in the entire life of their these malnourished children. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Now,
Good evening, sir. I am Nikesh. I wish to ask few questions on behalf of Vidya School.
Mm-hmm.
Are there exclusive diets for children with special needs?
Yes, as I mentioned, the NIN handbook, for example, which gives you the RDAs, or recommended dietary allowances, for sort of if you are malnourished, or if the malnourishment types, as I mentioned, whether it is the micronutrient malnourishment or protein malnourishment or something like that. So yes, there are sort of specialty diets for your special conditions. Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
On behalf of my friends, I wish to ask another question.
Mm-hmm.
How far has the midday meal scheme helped in lifting our less privileged children from the threshold of malnutrition?
Yes, your name, what is your name? Sorry, I missed your name.
Sir Nikesh.
Yeah, so Nikesh, for example, I do not know if you have heard of a NGO called Akshay Patra. Have you heard of them? Akshay Patra?
No,
सुना है
sir.
आपने नाम सुना है अक्षय पात्रा?
No, sir.
Akshay Patra, actually the phrase comes from, you know, our Mahabharata and all that. But there is a NGO which is formed by one of our IIT alumnus, which is sort of providing these midday meals. So now there are in something like 9 states, and each centralized kitchen, for example, provides the hot cooked meal. You know, Akshay Patra. So I happened to visit one in Gujarat near Baroda, then in somewhere near Nashik in Maharashtra, and then somewhere near IIT, which is about 120 kilometers from here in the district of Palghar. So each centralized kitchen can, for example, based on their capacity, can provide hot cooked meals to 25,000 up to 1.5 lakh. So the one at Baroda, for example, cooks meal. The kitchen starts operating right from 3 o'clock early in the morning, and so 12 o'clock, sharp 12 o'clock, they get delivered this midday meal. So their food is pretty good. So whereas the other midday meal schools, often at times we had a chance to sort of compare the one which is from Akshay Patra and one which is sort of, you know, from a conventional governmental sort of kitchens resident at the sort of, you know, these ashram shalas or what you call, yes, in these schools, in these tribal schools. And we say that often these ashram shala school were giving the carbohydrate rich food, you know. So as we said, just carbohydrate or giving that 2000 calories per day is not adequate, right? We said that should be a balanced food. It should have good cereals. So there is, if somebody is interested, should look for a word called dietary diversity. You understand, Nikesh? Dietary diversity means in your diet, how much of diversity is present. So they have some 7 groups of different food items. So cereals, lipids or fats, and then what you call as proteins and all that. So if you take a diverse diet, so this at times is missing in our midday meal schemes, but there are people who are taking our inputs. For example, in this Palghar district, the resident schools where we did this program, they have made changes in their midday meal scheme. I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So I'm Pallavi. On behalf of the Vidya School, I wish to thank you, sir. I now hand over the platform to Suraj of the National Institute of Open Schooling.
Good evening, everyone. I am Suraj Prabhakar. I want to ask few questions to you, sir. My first question is, can we hope to achieve zero hunger malnutrition by 2030 in keeping with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
Absolutely wonderful question. And thank you for asking me this question, and particularly coming from a younger generation like you. So what, Akshay, right? Your name is? Sorry, I missed your name.
Suraj.
Suraj. So see, for
Suraj, sir.
example, if you see our sort of, you know, from 1950, or let's say from independence onwards and till now, if you see, the availability of food has increased. If you see, for example, data which suggests that we make something like 290 million tons of grains, we have 80 million tons of milk. So we have come a far away. We don't have to import these foods that people in 1950s and 60s, I mentioned in the talk, that when I was born, for example, that we had to depend on the imported food. So now we have come that much far. But whereas on the same time, we see that there is good amount of malnutrition. As I said, 10 years back, my eyes were opened by alumnus from IIT Bombay showing this data. We have a distribution problem. So there is adequate, but there are people, for example, who are not able to afford apples which are 150 rupees per kilo, you know, or other fresh vegetables or fruits. So yes, by 2030, if we look forward to sort of, you know, achieving this sustainable development goal, we need to work on our supply chain systems so that, you know, the wastage of fresh fruits and vegetables in our country is something like that. On the website of Ministry of Food Processing, it says that 25 to 30% is wasted. So if we can have better supply chains, better cold chains, we do not waste what is produced by our farmers with so much hard labor, using our resources like soil and water, then by 2030, I think we can sort of achieve. So there is enough now, but there is so much wasted, as well as it does not reach, or it's out of the economic reach of the underprivileged. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. One question, sir. As a layperson, how can we measure man in different age groups?
Suraj, you were not very audible. If someone heard your questions,
Okay,
can you repeat? Because your voice was
sir, I
cracked.
will read.
Suraj, will you repeat your question, please?
As a
Can you type?
layperson, how can we measure malnutrition in different age groups?
I'll repeat his question.
Yeah,
I
Kalsi.
think what he's trying to say is that how would you determine what are the telltale signs of malnutrition in different age groups? So I think you have addressed that in your slides, sir, to an extent. You've shown us slides, but would you like to add to what you've said?
Right, Suraj. So you should look for those WHO growth charts. And if you have like X and Y axis, so on X axis, for example, is age of a child, and on Y axis you have the weight and height, and there will be some normal graph, for example, of normal growth. And those who are below that, so there's some kind of statistics we say that if you are sort of, you know, below certain weight for your age, or if your height is below something for your weight, then you are called malnourished. So there is a science of characterizing what is your malnourishment or what is your malnutrition, and to what extent it is. Is it severe or is it moderate, based on that those Z scores of -3, -2. And you can find that by online going just to the WHO growth charts. Yes, Suraj, I hope I could answer your.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you so much, sir.
And that's as far as the questions go from the VIDYA School students and our NIOS students. I would really like to thank you for a very informative session. And some of the takeaways were really a revelation. One, of course, was a very strong message in a fun-filled manner that you've given to VIDYA students, and I'm sure the representatives here and Suraj representing the NIOS will carry this message along with them. And that is, please do not be couch potatoes. You need to run out and play in the sun. Stop watching too many videos online. Of course, they've had a surfeit of online classes. And I think they need to get away from that mode and now be out in the open, playing games and absorbing all the sunshine that they can. Because you said 15 to 20 minutes out in the open gives you enough vitamin D and E. So children, that's a message for you. Please carry that away with you. And also, what to eat. You are what you eat, which again is such a good message. Because at the VIDYA School, for one, I know we stopped aerated drinks. So there are no aerated drinks. We've moved to wholesome, healthy food, of course, to the dismay of the students, because they love to gorge on samosas and pakoras and all that fried stuff. But that's okay once in a while. But we have tried to inculcate more wholesome eating habits. But of course, there's a lot of homework for our canteen contractor to do. Food to food fortification, what you spoke about, we will definitely carry this forward. And my plate, again, was another very important concept for all our children. And the visuals and the pictorials were so enlightening that I'm sure they've absorbed a lot of what you said, and they need to carry it forward. And again, I would like to compliment you on your program in Dharavi. We know of Dharavi as a corona hotspot, but you have transformed it into a wholesome food hotspot by distributing wholesome food to the people at Dharavi. So this is a great project that you've entered into and carried it forward. So my whole concept of Dharavi has changed now. And I'm sure it's happened also with the others who are viewing this program today, that a lot of good work is happening at Dharavi. And so also, I feel that the government needs to take cognizance of health programs dealing with malnourishment. And I think you've assumed a stellar role in this direction. It's so heartening to know that you have really taken up cudgels against malnutrition and are doing very exemplary work in this direction. But the government needs to take cognizance of this, because it's going to have a very important bearing on the cognitive development of our youth, who are going to be the torchbearers of India in the 21st century. And if we need to equip them with skills like developing a scientific temperament, a spirit of inquiry, originality, creativity, ingenuity, they need to have a proper balanced diet that will be reflected in good cognitive development, which will enable them to internalize these skills, which are imperative for those who are going to join India's task force. So thank you so much for touching upon all these issues. It was an absolute delight to have you with us today. But I have two questions, if you have the time, sir. May I pose my questions? Because these questions have been on my mind.
Please.
So, sir, one question is that our GDP has gone up by 50% in 2030, yet 1/3 of our children remain malnourished and half below the age of 3. Why is this so? And I think I'll club two questions together, because maybe you could address them together and the answer would be the same. And the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World Report 2020 says, so this is not so far away, says that 14% of India's population is malnourished, and 34.7% of children below the age of 5 have a stunted growth. To add to that, you spoke about severe acute malnutrition. The figure goes up to 7.5%. These are alarming figures. How do we address these issues?
Yeah, so good questions and evidenced or backed up by the data of 2020 report and things like that. So we are also like I must say here that looking at the work of our center here at IIT Bombay, UNICEF has sponsored a center of excellence for child malnutrition here, and we have 5 of our students every year. UNICEF funds them for 2+1 year, in the sense that MTech is 2 years, and the third year of they get a fellowship of some 60,000 rupees per month, and they work as the UNICEF fellows, and different states they are working. So this is something which we are also struggling with, and we still have this 1992 Science Congress. If I'm 91 or 92, I'm not sure. Our ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh ji said that malnutrition is shame to India. And whatever numbers you said, it really does not make us proud. And as I said, in 2010, my friend from US, the IIT alumnus who came, and he had to open my eyes and show the numbers that which are given in the statistics of these NFHS and WHO statistics and whatever reports that also you cited. So this problem is a sort of is a stupendous task of how do we revive, how do we sort of energize this our scheme of ICDS. On one hand, we take a pride that this is one of the flagship program of the government, that it's one of the largest program in the world. But how do we make it more effective? So that's a challenge. Yes, we are sort of working. Some of my colleagues here are sort of working in data sciences, and how do we, for example, give to a collector of a district, for example, using these technologies of GIS. You might have heard GIS. So you have a color coded map, and indicating to him where the shoe bites, for example. And how do we sort of, in a given sort of district, how do you make the talukas malnutrition free? Because in social sciences, I'm not a social scientist myself, but what we have heard is a condition of where this is called positive deviance. And what positive deviance, some of you, the teachers who are from social science domain, would understand that you create a case, you create a block inside a state which is malnutrition free, and those, or you create Anganwadis, for example, who for a 2 months, 3 months, out of the 70 children in that that there is no Sam or Ma'am child, and the other Anganwadis would come and say that. So if we, like expert, like not only, I mean, I cannot call myself as an expert. I have just worked in some of these projects. But let's say if you have the dietitians and nutritionists, for example, howsoever they might give you the guidelines, National Institute of Nutrition creating the protocols. But what works best in this transfer is creating positive deviance. You have the Anganwadis, you have the blocks. So the district magistrate or the district head, the collector, for example, sees that, look, and see, for example, we did, for example, a program called Vajan Tyohar. If you understand Hindi, Vajan Tyohar means in a particular week of a year, there will be this, all the Anganwadis across in that district, the children will be weighed. Because one of the simple problem was, we did not have the digital balances working. I mean, what IIT we are talking about, what technology we are talking about. I mean, we are wanting to, yesterday only there were some images about moon, that Mars landing, I mean, how can we make these problems solve, and one of our Indian scientists was also sort of associated, and her interview was projected on the TV. And I think in news media also something has come. It's good that we land on the Mars, but first, it's ma'am, I'm let me say this, 30 years back when I was doing my PhD in France, my French professor used to tell me, he used to say that, when you are sort of, trying to work on atomic energy and all that, and, going to moon and all that, first feed your, fellow Indians. Right. I felt so much that time. I just retorted to him for the sake of retorting. I said, you don't want us to make nuclear weapons because France can sell it to us. I just came out of my pride. I was so young that time, but he was so right. A posteriori, now I see that he was so right, that, first solve your problems and then get into this. So not that we don't have to work, 15-20% of our scientists can work on this cutting edge research. But I think we need to, you rightly mentioned that in spite of our GDP doing this, why do we have this kind of undernourishment? We are struggling, ma'am. We are doing, this is a stupendous task. And I would really appeal to our young generation, the young students, that do take a cognizance of this. And not only for you and your families, but if you can sort of, look for those who are further underprivileged than you when you sort of become adults. I hope I could.
Thank you, because, I find it's a paradoxical situation, because our government granaries are overflowing and yet we have malnutrition. So we're in a very ironical setup. And so I guess you did mention a faulty distribution center, but, I'm sure there are other underlying factors to it also. So thank you so much, sir, for giving us those very valuable inputs. And we'd love you to visit the VIDYA School and talk to our students. I mean, they would really gain from your expertise. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Mumbai team for hosting this Mega Tech Fest X 2021, which they've done with clockwork precision and in an exemplary manner. I would like to thank and a special word of appreciation to all the students, all the participants who have showcased their talent in an exemplary manner, and a special word of thanks to the coordinators, teachers, support staff, without whose contribution this event would not have been the success that it has been. So thank you so much, everyone. And we look forward to meeting you again, maybe on a different platform, but this is not goodbye. This is au revoir till we meet again. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Ms. Dilruba, just if I can, there was one lady who was sort of, kept contacting me and pursuing me, Mrs. Mathur or something, Mrs. Mathur of Mumbai region of Vidya.
Priyanka Mathur. Priyanka Mathur, right.
See her face for 5 seconds. If she,
Priyanka,
I
are you
want
there?
to talk to her because my wife wants to teach, because she used to be in a computer science center here, and she wants to now, she has kind of taken a voluntary retirement and wants to sort of get engaged in teaching computer science to the students. So can I see her somewhere, or she's not there?
Mihala, is Priyanka there?
Ma'am, I don't think so. Priyanka is there, but I can convey the message to her. Yeah.
Sir, we'll convey your message to Priyanka, and we would love to have your wife come and teach our students. It would be a great experience for them.
Of course, in these times it will be online.
Yes,
but
yes.
We can sort of, because she has taken voluntary retirement after say 5-6 months back, and that she feels that whatever skills she has in teaching all those C++ and Java and